There is a moment, somewhere in the middle of a cruise vacation, when the ship stops feeling like a ship. The buffet is open, the pool is full, the hallways are carpeted, climate-controlled, and smell faintly of something pleasant. You could forget entirely that you are aboard a steel structure floating in the middle of open water with no land in sight. That forgetting is by design. But it also obscures something important. A large modern cruise ship is carrying at any given moment millions of gallons of heavy fuel oil, thousands of mattresses, tens of thousands of square feet of carpet and synthetic furnishings, industrial kitchens running around the clock, laundry facilities the size of warehouses, electrical systems powerful enough to supply a small city, compressed gases, lubricants, paint lockers stocked with flammable materials, and somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 human beings who, if something goes catastrophically wrong, have essentially nowhere to go. There is no fire department 30 minutes away. There is no external water supply. There is no mutual aid. The closest help might be another ship hours distant, or a Coast Guard helicopter that cannot possibly arrive before a fire has already made its decisions. So the question is real, and it matters. What actually stops a fire aboard a cruise ship from spreading? The obvious answer is sprinklers, maybe extinguishers. The same basic idea as a hotel or an office building: detect it, douse it, done. That answer is incomplete to the point of being misleading. What a modern cruise ship actually uses is not a fire suppression system. It is a fire containment architecture built into the steel, encoded in international law, rehearsed by every crew member on board, and so thoroughly embedded in the ship's physical design that passengers move through it every day without the faintest idea it exists. To understand why that architecture had to be built, you need to understand what fire actually does on a ship. And to understand that, you need to look at what happened when the architecture was not there. On April 7, 1990, a passenger ferry called the Scandinavian Star departed Oslo bound for Frederikshavn, Denmark. It was carrying approximately 500 passengers and crew. Sometime after 2 a.m., a fire started on Deck 3 in a corridor. Within 45 minutes, 159 people were dead. Most of them did not die from flames. They died from smoke inhalation, trapped in their cabins or in corridor dead ends, in a ship whose layout did not logically lead to emergency exits. The crew had received approximately 10 days of training before the voyage. Many had never participated in a fire drill. Crew members speaking different languages, Portuguese, Norwegian, Danish, English, could not coordinate effectively in the dark, and the ship's ventilation system, which circulated air throughout the vessel to keep passengers comfortable, had distributed smoke through the accommodation spaces before anyone could stop it. The Scandinavian Star did not burn down because fire suppression is impossible at sea. It burned because the systems that exist to contain shipboard fire either were not present, were not maintained, or were not operated by people who knew how to use them. The physical separation between fire zones was compromised by design vulnerabilities. The ventilation kept running, communication failed, and in the time it took for any of that to be understood and corrected, the window for survival closed. That disaster became the pressure event behind some of the most significant reforms in modern maritime fire safety. The architecture passengers board today was, in large part, engineered in response to what happened on that ship. Here's the thing about fire at sea that the sprinkler mental model misses entirely. The most dangerous weapon fire has is not flame, it is smoke. And the mechanism fire uses to distribute smoke is the ship's own infrastructure. A large cruise ship is a sealed environment. The HVAC system moves air continuously through every cabin, every corridor, every service space. That is what makes it livable. But air that flows through ducts and ventilation pathways does not care whether it is carrying fresh oxygen or toxic combustion byproducts. Without intervention, the system that regulates temperature and air quality becomes the fire's delivery network. The ship's movement compounds the problem. A vessel underway creates pressure differentials across the structure. Wind and forward motion interact with exhaust vents and air intakes in ways that can actively pull smoke toward occupied spaces rather than away from them. And then there is the fundamental constraint that makes everything else harder. A ship at sea cannot be rapidly evacuated. Abandoning ship means putting thousands of people into lifeboats on open water at night in weather conditions that may be actively dangerous. That option exists, but it cannot be the first plan. The system has to stop the fire from reaching people, not simply move people away from the fire. That constraint taken seriously, produces a completely different engineering problem than a land-based building faces. The primary solution is structural. A modern cruise ship is not a single space. It is a collection of sealed compartments, divided by vertical fire zones, what maritime regulations call main vertical zones. Each zone is bounded by A-class steel bulkheads, which are not ordinary walls. They are rated fire barriers, tested to contain flame and smoke for up to 60 minutes without the temperature on the unexposed side rising beyond defined limits. The highest rated version, A60, can hold for a full hour under direct fire exposure. The zones run the length of the ship. A single zone can extend up to 48 meters. A large cruise ship will have multiple zones from bow to stern. The fire doors that span the boundaries between them are self-closing, designed to be gas-tight under pressure and can be sealed remotely from the bridge. Here is where the first major twist appears. The main vertical zone structure is not just a fire safety add-on bolted onto a ship's design. It is one of the primary constraints that determines the ship's design. Where corridors run, how electrical conduit is routed, how plumbing is distributed, where staircases can be placed, all of it flows downstream from where the zone boundaries are. The geometry of the ship, the experience passengers have moving through it, the spatial logic of every deck, all of it is shaped at a foundational level by fire physics. When you walk through a cruise ship hallway and pass through what feels like a slightly heavier door, or notice that a corridor seems to end and begin again at a threshold, you are navigating zone boundaries. The architecture passengers experience as hotel-like and familiar is, in its underlying logic, a fire containment grid. It is just invisible because it is working. The suppression systems layered on top of this structure are not a single system. They are a portfolio, matched to the fire risk of each space type. Engine rooms use CO2 flooding, not water, because introducing water to a fuel or electrical fire makes things worse, and CO2 displaces oxygen in a sealed space to extinguish the fire chemically. Accommodation spaces use water mist or sprinkler systems, heat-activated heads that respond individually, not the dramatic whole-ceiling deluge that film has trained people to expect. High-risk lockers, paint storage, fuel-adjacent spaces use combinations of CO2, dry powder, and water spray simultaneously because different fire chemistries require different suppression responses. The fire suppression system on a cruise ship is not a default. It is a decision for each space based on what that space contains and what class of fire it is most likely to produce. Then there is the ventilation kill switch. Every fan and every duct damper feeding each fire zone can be isolated remotely from the bridge. The ship carries a mandatory document called the Fire Control Plan, physically posted throughout the vessel, updated and inspected regularly, that maps every damper, every fan, every zone boundary, every suppression station. When a fire alarm activates in a zone, the bridge can cut airflow to that zone in seconds. This is the second major twist, and it is genuinely counterintuitive. In a fire emergency, one of the most important actions the crew must take is to stop the ship from breathing. Shutting off ventilation to an affected zone feels wrong in the moment. There may be people in that zone who need air, but leaving the ventilation running feeds the fire faster than it helps anyone survive. The fire gets oxygen, the smoke gets a highway, both spread. The system works because the decision is not made in the emergency. It is pre-made. The fire control plan exists so that crew members are executing a protocol they have practiced, not improvising under stress. This brings in the detection layer. Smoke detectors in every cabin, every corridor, and every service space feed a central fire panel on the bridge. Local audible alarms in cabins alert occupants immediately. The entire detection architecture exists to compress the response window as tightly as possible because the first 2 minutes of a shipboard fire are categorically different from the next 10. In the first 2 minutes, the fire is containable within the space of origin. By the time it has moved through a ventilation pathway and established itself in a second space, the equation has changed. If pulling apart the hidden mechanics of systems like this is the kind of thinking you want to do more of, the way a familiar surface cracks open to reveal the operational logic underneath, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe if that's what you're here for. Every crew member on a modern cruise ship has a designated fire station assignment, not just the trained firefighting teams. Every crew member, the ones managing passenger movement, the ones controlling ventilation, the ones running communications, the ones establishing accountability for who is where, the physical systems, the zone boundaries, the suppression agents, the damper closures, buy time. The crew is what uses the time correctly. Fire drills are mandatory by international regulation. But there is a requirement that goes further than that. In 2010, following years of regulatory development, SOLAS introduced what is now called Safe Return to Port. It applies to all passenger ships over 120 meters with keels laid from July 2010 onward. The requirement is this: after losing any single fire zone entirely, not surviving a small fire, not containing a limited incident, but losing a complete zone, the ship must remain capable of returning to port under its own power, not anchored, not adrift, waiting for assistance, moving, propulsion intact, navigation functional, communications operational, passenger support systems running in designated safe areas outside the affected zone. This is not merely a fire safety regulation. It is a design philosophy written into law. The ship is not built to tolerate a fire and then wait to be rescued. It is built to absorb the loss of a section of itself and continue functioning. To satisfy that requirement, essential systems, power, propulsion, navigation, communications must be routed redundantly through separate zones so that the loss of any one zone does not sever them. The ship is engineered so that its critical architecture has no single point of failure that a single zone casualty can exploit. The regulatory philosophy, stated plainly in SOLAS documentation, is this: the ship is its own best lifeboat. Evacuation into open water is the last resort. The ship should be designed to make that last resort unnecessary. Return to the Scandinavian Star. The 1990 disaster did not happen because fire suppression at sea is impossible. It happened because every layer of the architecture that now exists either was absent, was compromised, or was operated by people who had no preparation for the moment they faced. The zone boundaries were penetrated by design vulnerabilities. The ventilation distributed smoke before any damper could be closed. The crew, with 10 days of training and no common language, could not coordinate the response. The corridor layout trapped people in dead ends, and by the time the window to act had opened, it had already closed. Every A-class division rating, every mandatory drill cycle, every fire control plan posted at every station on a modern ship, every redundant power feed engineered to bypass a casualty zone, every crew member who knows their fire station assignment before the ship leaves port. These things exist because 159 people died in 45 minutes when they did not. That is the real architecture. When nothing goes wrong on a cruise ship, when the buffet runs and the pool is warm and the climate-controlled hallways remain entirely ordinary, the system that made all of that ordinary becomes invisible. The zone boundaries disappear into the walls. The damper controls sit untouched in the bridge panel. The fire control plan hangs on its post, unread by anyone who doesn't need it. The CO2 systems in the engine room wait in readiness that no passenger ever sees. The absence of catastrophe is the product, and because the product is absent, it generates no awareness of itself. What stops a cruise ship fire from spreading is not a single mechanism and not a single decision. It is a layered architecture built into steel rated to hold fire for 60 minutes, distributed across zones that shape every corridor and staircase on the ship, matched to the specific chemistry of each space's fire risk, mapped in documents that every crew member is trained to execute, and now extended by law into the design of redundant systems capable of keeping the ship moving even after a section of it burns. The familiar floating hotel, the carpeted hallways, the balcony view over open ocean, all of it sits on top of a structure designed from the inside out around a single organizing principle. The fire is permitted to exist in one place for a defined amount of time, and then it stops there. That is what the ship actually is. It just runs quietly enough that no one has to know. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new about one of the most fascinating engineering marvels ever built by mankind. If you want more content like this, please subscribe and hit that like button. I'm Larry, and this is the Ship Files. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.